A long time ago, I used to go and try and find specific pieces of news in the video game industry and talk about them. And I used to kind of focus in on one, and we're not going to do that. One, it kind of, for some stuff, becomes very hard to stretch it out or even talk about because it's very like up in the air. And at the same time, I think it's much more interesting to have a general type of news talking about points because they kind of go into each other, especially with how things go. But we're specifically going to be talking about February 26th. So the past week or so of news that has come out. Most of it is going to be quite recent because I pulled these articles the day before and the day of, so it's going to be more recency bias, but that's the way it is when you go to pull articles. And we're going to go in a haphazard order of the ones that I want to talk about because they're not really specific. There's a couple that I really will highlight, but that'll go on based on length, and you'll see random gameplay in the background. It's more than likely right now, Balatro, I guess, maybe, I don't know. But uh, we're gonna first go into a very small mention that I wanted to highlight is EA has put Dragon Age: The Veilguard on PS Plus, which is really odd to me because while Dragon Age: The Veilguard has been hated quite recently, and we'll talk about a bit of the hatred around newer games with another article I want to talk about, but overall, it BioWare has confirmed that it's downsizing in January, and it says that Mass Effect, the new next Mass Effect, doesn't require support from the full studio, and most of the employees have been moved to different projects like Skate and Iron Man. That's already been kind of like happening. It's been highlighted in January, but it also happened last year, even before Veilguard's release. But it definitely Veilguard has kind of put the final nail in the coffin that was once BioWare, which is really sad because I feel like BioWare at one point was a very good company to kind of always buy games from. I don't look at it from the perspective of their jobs and necessarily like the studio like a legacy, because studio legacy is important, but it's more for me it's more based on the safety of the consumer, not as in like literal safety, but if you were to buy the game, whatever it may be from them, you want the safety that the money was worth it, that it was worth the time, it was worth the investment. And with BioWare, it hasn't really felt that like that for a long time. There's arguments that you can make that it hasn't been that way since Mass Effect 3, which I feel like is a little bit of a stretch. I understand a lot of people didn't really like Anthem. I get that. That's not a very good example, of course, but Andromeda is a great example of, I feel like I hated on until Oblivion, even though it was just a decent to good game. But it's really sad to see BioWare basically at this point uh, kind of just be folded out. It looks like they are probably gonna, if we're being brutally honest here, probably just gonna release a Mass Effect that doesn't really land well, similar to Veilguard, and they're gonna disappear at that point. EA is very stubborn; they don't change with the times, but eventually, if you do enough crap at the wall, they don't really. They're just gonna blow the wall down and just say, "Get out." They don't really care. EA has never cared about video games, so besides the money they make on it, but it's very sad to see BioWare go. But going on the same PlayStation topic real quick, there is a big deal going on. I always love to point out sales if I can. Deal Mania is lasting on the PlayStation Store. Usually I don't like to highlight online stores that much, but sadly that is the primary way most people get games now, which is really depressing. But there's quite a few games that I saw that looked really good for the price. Ace Combat 7, if you haven't played, is a pretty good like overall Ace Combat game. If you've never tried Ace Combat, I think it's worth the $15 to try it. I think it is a special edition that's available, so you do get some DLC along with it, which I think is really good. A game that I haven't gotten a chance to play that I might pick up during this is Alone in the Dark. It looks to be just under $30, maybe, but I did want to play that, didn't get a chance to last year. You have, speaking of Anthem, Anthem is less than $5, which at that point it has to be worth it, right? I've played it. I have played Anthem. Um, it's I do think it's worth $5. It's fun. It's a little too boring unless you have friends, but hey, there's you. You have the Call of Duty sales, which I usually ignore, but you have the Insane Trilogy with the CTR Nitro Refueled, which you get for about $30. You get the platformers, and then you get the kart racer, which honestly is pretty good for the price. I know the Insane Trilogy goes around on sale just under $20, maybe like $16, $17, but overall it is, if you don't like it, I'm sure the Insane Trilogy is on there. These are just the ones I like marked down, but yeah, overall $30 and you get Crash games. I'm not a big fan of Crash platformers, but I do like the kart racer, so it's worth it. You have the Crisis remasters that are all under $10. Uh, I For a lot of people that haven't played Crisis, you're not really gonna find a great game. Uh, it spawned a meme that I'm sure most of you have heard at this point, but it's one of those things where Crisis, I feel like, hasn't really aged well. It was a great technological marvel, and by marvel I mean technological attempt back in the day, but now it's not really a game. It reminds me more of a gameplay demo or even like a technological demo than anything else. But hey, it's under $10. If you like Crisis, pick it up. You have the new Dead Space, is the digital deluxe edition, I'm pretty sure. Uh, and we get honestly, if we're being honest, it's a remake that didn't really need to exist, but it's nice to see, and I do think that a lot of the improvements are cool for it. But if you haven't played Dead Space, $20, it's a really good game. It is a really good game. You have Death Stranding also for $20. If you haven't played it, check it out. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is for $15, which is really, really, really good for it. If you're a Dragon Ball fan at all, you probably have already played it. But if you like a very simplistic action RPG, it's very, very fun. I happen to think that it's one of the best ways to kind of turn your brain off in a way. So it's really, really cool to see that on sale. The first Hades is $10. At this point, Hades 2 is being worked on as time goes on. And so it depends if you haven't picked this up. If you want to try it, $10, not really like a loss, really, to say. There's also the Far Cry Insanity Bundle, which has 3, 4, 5, I think. And that's $18. And I'm going to be brutally honest, that's a really good deal. I understand Far Cry has kind of faded from being like the hype game that it used to be. But when we look at what you're getting for $18, I mean, 3 and 4 alone are really good games. And while I didn't really play 5, yeah, I mean, it's Far Cry. There's a level of quality there. It might not be spectacular, but still should stand on its own as a game. But maybe I'll play that one day. You have Hogwarts Legacy, which we'll talk about also later with something that's going on. You get the deluxe edition, I think. Yeah, so you get the deluxe edition for $30. It might be worth the pickup. I didn't find the game super, super interesting. Like, it's good, but it's not like a standout if you're not a Harry Potter fan. So there's that. Immortals Phoenix Rising. I think this game is ass, but I do mention it because it just. I feel like a lot of people talk about this game and they're like, I want to play it. And so if you see this on sale, don't pick it up. I don't think it's that fun. It's very boring, but it is $12, so whatever. I'm going to ignore a bunch of these that I wrote down. I realize they're not that interesting. Kingdom Hearts all in one package is $40. I love Kingdom Hearts. If you haven't tried Kingdom Hearts, recommend it. Re-Reckoning for Kingdoms of Amalur is $8. Really good game. I haven't played the remake or the remaster, whatever you want to call it, but I did like the original for a decent amount of time. You have Marvel Spider-Man Remastered is $25, a little too expensive. Mass Effect Andromeda is $5. I've talked about that already. It's a decent game. It's worth $5 for sure. We'll talk about this in a minute, but Shadow of War is $5. Definitely worth it. Neo Remastered is 25. Not just go. I mean, at this point, you could find the original for like $5. I don't recommend it. It's not like the remaster has changed that much. It's good. I love Neo, but when it comes to saving money or when it comes to getting your value out of it, if you're gonna play the game, get frustrated, and quit, go play the $5 one versus the $25 one. The Prince of Persia: Lost Crown Complete Edition, which is weird to see this. I'm pretty sure this came out not super recently, but recently enough. $25. I heard that's actually pretty good. I haven't played it personally, but it is on my list. Maybe I'll pick it up. You have Shadow of the Colossus remastered version for $10. One of the best games of all time. But yeah, that's just mentioned in it. The South Park collection is $12, which gets you 2 of the RPGs. I think both are pretty good. I have not finished one of them. Stick of Truth I did finish, and it's really good. It's definitely worth $12. You're getting your money's worth for sure. Especially if you like South Park. If you don't like South Park, it might take away from it, but I do think they're decent RPGs. They're very simplistic, but they work out. You have The Witcher 3, which is $8, really good pickup. The Wolf Among Us, which I think is probably Telltale's best work in general, is $7. If you haven't played it, I do recommend actually picking it up. I think it's very fun. It's also one of those games that I feel kind of is special if you haven't played it, haven't seen it. It's not. A lot of people would argue like The Walking Dead is their best work. I mean, at the time, yeah, it worked really well, but The Wolf Among Us is really, really high quality. I feel like I feel the love in that game, even if Telltale isn't a great company. But and we have the Wolfenstein games are all $5, which kind of weird to see. I feel like Wolfenstein has been well received in its new rendition, and I haven't played these new renditions, but hey, they're there. So there's a bunch of games you could pick up that I also didn't mention because they're either not that great of a price in comparison to before, or they really aren't that interesting to really talk about. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Skyrim again over and over, right? But ignoring that, we go into another story about studies, which I probably should have paired the studies together. Let me see. I'm actually going to move this over. I have them all in like spreadsheet, but ignoring that, I have both studies in order now, but the study basically focuses on what a young person is feeling, what they are focusing on for what they want out of gaming, and they say in the study, which I do want to talk about, were surveyed about what they want to see in media, and romance and or sex came in 15th out of 21 options. Its opposite, content that doesn't include sex or romance, came in at 8th place. Friendships and social groups came at 5th. Now, one of the biggest problems I have with a lot of these studies in general when it comes to media at all is so you when you survey people, they're gonna have this bias of what these mean. And if you just put romance or sex, I'm sure it's much more spread out. Usually romance and or sex, when someone mentions that, just that, is a very awkward thing for a lot of people to talk about, to share their opinion of, to even say yes or no. It's one of those things that they will just kind of go, like, because it's a very personal thing. So I feel like this option is always gonna kind of be misleading, along with content that doesn't include sex or romance. I feel like this is also one of those things where it's fine if it's there, but a lot of people get tired of seeing it be focused on. It's usually the primary focus, secondary focus, or even just like having a decent focus on it when it is available, which is very, very frustrating. And friendships and social groups coming in 5th. When you list these out in these orders, I happen to think that more people just want good relationships in media. They want a good storytelling perspective on a good relationship. It's not, they don't, I think drama is tired out, is basically what I get from this. I don't think romance is like, like gonna die out. I just think the romance that has been displayed is really poor, and more importantly, is very tired out at this point. It's a lot of drama focus. It's a lot of just, oh, blah 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 did this, and now that person's angry. It's very annoying. It's very just not fun, and it doesn't showcase a healthy relationship for anybody. Which is probably why teens are saying they don't want to see it, because they can already see bad things happening in social media specifically. Uh, it it's really hard to go from, hey, I read it on social media that some woman killed her husband because he cheated on her, and then go to a video game and the wife is doing something that is similar, or the husband, or or both partners or whatever have you is doing it, or you go to a TV show and it's a cop show about how this person cheated, and like at that point there's too much of the same thing that is just tired out. And teens already struggle with the empathy. They're usually a lot better than adults, but they already struggle with empathy, and so at that point you're just tired out. So I can definitely see fade out kind of going from this. But it is kind of cool to see that, not see, but it is kind of cool to see like these numbers do show that more of the youth are getting uninterested in romance and sex, uh, mostly because it's become common knowledge. And I do think that's a negative for the most part. Not that it's become common knowledge, I think it's become too common. And that's mostly uh, kind of my opinion. And this article, which I'll probably put up, or maybe, uh, is someone saying, as a kid in the 90s, I remember being annoyed that they'd always put some soppy romantic subplot in movies that were otherwise about explosions, and no one seemed to worry that my generation hates sex and romance. Yeah, and they're basically saying, so I'm a little skeptical about these numbers. Uh, Granted, I made a poor example. I'm not married and I don't have any kids, so maybe I'm just ahead of my time. But overall, I kind of do agree with it. I do think this is a very skeptical leaning like study. I I happen to wonder if the numbers are not being showcased as just people being tired of how the subject is displayed, basically, which kind of goes into another thing that's kind of being tired out, in my opinion, and that is the consequences of excessive video game use in the future. And the study reveals, but in reality, this is much more focused on the health aspect, which I do think is important. But when you title something like that, I roll my eyes, because a lot of these studies about video games are usually proven way later to be, one, completely wrong, and two, very biased to the point that it's overly frustrating. But this one talks about very basic shit, which I is kind of frustrating, because there's actually some really cool aspects to the study that is overwritten and kind of not highlighted properly. The whole entire study is really cool, but uh, the very beginning of it focuses on the basic fact that if you sit still in a chair, or even if you're standing up and you sit there and you or stand there and you play video games, you're not getting correct blood flow and yeah, obviously, if you're not doing physical activity in an extended period of time, it's gonna ruin your body. Like, I feel like that didn't really need to be said, and I get it if that's what you want this study to be your main focus of, but it's the first like 20% of it, and the rest of it is much more interesting. Very poor like design on the study. But one of the things is the actual physical structure of, for example, I'm sure a lot of people have seen like your head it actually changes shape due to headsets, which is very scary. But also at the same time, the one that I'm more interested is hand posture, because I have a lot of problems with my hands. No surprise, I play way too much. But I I happen to be very interested into it because I have played quite a few different game consoles, and I've used PC for gaming as well. And in the name of the channel, I've played them for a lot of hours. So it's very interesting to see how potentially someone like me will differ from somebody who maybe plays for 2 hours a day, like on average, versus I would say I don't even know how much I would say I play. I don't actually play that much anymore, but I used to play a lot more. So it's I would love to see more on that, like how your hands actually change, because I do know, for example, if you use a lot of like screwdrivers or if you use a lot of like wrenches, your hand size will actually kind of change along with how your palm is like shaped, which is very interesting to me. But it's much more of a just interesting concept that is highlighted with a very poor start to the study. I do recommend at least checking it out. Uh, they are very, very focused on the fact that uh, stuff is changing, but they do highlight that there are cognitive benefits. Hand-eye coordination and ability to solve complex problems are improving with video games, which it's kind of true. I don't know whether that's really applicable to real life a lot of the time. I feel like there's always a disconnect with video game problem solving and real life problem solving. Some people are really good at doing it. They're able to go like, "Oh, I ran into this in a video game once. Let me just kind of go along. Oh, it didn't really work out. We'll change it." But some people struggle to change that aspect of them, and they go, "Oh, I it didn't work. I guess I will just try something completely different." But overall, I do think the study is interesting. Much better of a study than the last one. But yeah, going on, we had much more video game focused news, not just studies around them. We had Microsoft is deciding to delay the release of Fable to 2026. I'm gonna be brutally honest, for Fable fans, this should come at no surprise for you, like at all. Uh, I feel like the showcase of the footage that happened, I think it was last summer, I want to say, it was focused much more on the character and story. And I feel like ultimately that this game is going to kind of stretch to maybe even being delayed more as time goes on. But we'll see. We do have a lot of Microsoft games that are coming up in this year, so we'll see how they react to that. I'm specifically thinking of the new Doom. Outer Worlds 2 is supposed to come out, and then Gears of War E-Day, which Gears of War E-Day is very big for a lot of us fans. But when it comes to Fable, I feel like Fable is a game series that has really been forgotten about, and so it's really like a lot of us old fans are kind of like wary of it, because a lot of people will say they love Fable 1 and 2 and then kind of be like, I'm mid on 3. Or some people will say they only played 3 and they loved it. And so it's kind of like a very mix of a community, which is already a dying one at that. I do think Fable is a good series overall, so if you do get the chance to play them, do at least check it out to see if you would like the new one. But I don't know. I'm not sure how Fable will really work nowadays, and I also think we're still feeling the effects of Baldur's Gate 3, and we will for probably a long time. So we'll see how it works out on that one. But this goes into another thing. The Avowed director hints at a future for the franchise, and I just want to say, mostly like around a lot of this game, that just accept the game for what it is. If it's not your taste, it's not your taste. That's cool. And at the same time, I really don't like the online discourse that starts with every new game. I talked about the Veilguard one earlier, but man, it's really irritating to see a bunch of people that, one, won't play the game, or two, that have played the game, just kind of do this little song and dance with each other. I feel like if you haven't played the game, don't like just say I'm not getting it, and there you go. I don't need a sense after that. Just call it that. And at the same time, there's a lot of people that have played it that want to like deconstruct it, like they're really good at reviewing games. I'm gonna be brutally honest. 99% of people can't review shit, and it's just the way it is. I can't do it, and most of the media can't do it either. So please stop reviewing games. You're not good at it. Nobody is. There's a couple that I think are good, but then sometimes it just they don't review like they don't review the stuff that is important to me. So it becomes like, well, at this point, I don't really care. And so you miss out on a lot of the reviews because of that. And so when it comes to just review content, don't watch it. Uh, I I try and leave my reviews very open if I talk about stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, my opinion is going to differ wildly from someone even of the same age and same games in their life. So it becomes really hard. But ignoring that, I just want to say leave the game open to your own interpretation. I do think it's a very fun game. And when it comes to like sales, I'm interested to see the sales numbers. I know they're going to actually be a lot lower than the hype people think, and I do think they're going to be higher than the people hating on the game. I happen to think the universe is very interesting. I'm probably going to check out the Pillars of Eternity games now. So I'm excited to see if they will invest more on this world and maybe connect it more directly to Pillars of Eternity, because apparently it is very connected, but I'm interested to see how far they take it. But that'll be far down the line. You have the PlayStation 5 Pro sales have fallen behind PlayStation 4 Pro sales, which makes sense. It's a very, very expensive console. And I really don't think enough games received improvements. And when it comes to like overall game like releases, uh the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are both going to suffer from just when they came out and also being too early of a release for the console. I understand a lot of people love the technological upgrades. They love their games looking as beautiful as possible, and I do too. I do think photorealism has a place in video games sometimes, or even just showcasing how far we've come, but I feel like the overall focus, as I've talked about a couple times, is kind of being drained into very, very awkward states for most people. They find it very frustrating that they have to install a 120 gigabyte game that only lasts 10 hours. It's a very problematic thing, especially since online data, for some areas, specifically mine, is not free. You don't just get unlimited data for existing or unlimited downloads or whatever you want to call it. Uh, when it comes to the overall like huge size of these games, I happen to think if you focus on art style and you stick to it, you can come away with something truly spectacular that will outlast everything, as long as you put your heart and soul into it, or at least I'd hope so. I really don't like the kind of generic, like smoothed over art style. I talked about Avowed earlier. That's one of the things I kind of wish wasn't a standard nowadays, is that smooth look. I think if we could just go back in time to something like Okami, which Okami 2, please save me. Uh, Even like such things as Ninja Gaiden, the kind of reboot series that happens. Yes, don't get me wrong. As time went on, they kind of got this like almost photorealistic look, or they were getting better at like going with it, but at the same time they still stuck to this like gritty, like dark shadowed style that I think really worked well. And it's not necessarily you need to make your own full blown art style, but I do think that you need to kind of at least stick to a theme, stick to something than just photorealism, or oh, the smooth look has been selling well for somebody else. But yeah, when it comes down to it, I expect sales for consoles to actually go down as we go along, unless massive sales occur like $200 off, which I don't think they can for the PlayStation 5 Pro for a long time. I think early November was when it came out, and we're what, 3 months in. So yeah, we'll see what happens as $100 get knocked off and people are like, yeah, maybe it's worth it. But we have Tekken 8 director, of course, going and complaining about fans again, which I always love because I think fans don't actually know what they want. It's talking about the Anna, uh, the costume, I guess, and overall, I happen to think it looks pretty good. It's very different than what she looked in Tekken 7. Uh, but I also happen to think that no matter what you do for Tekken 8, a lot of people are always going to be unhappy because Tekken 7 was in the kind of the fighting game boom that happened for a long time. It was out for 10 years before or Tekken 8. So it's always going to be a lot of people just complaining. I do kind of see where some people are complaining about the kind of character design of Tekken 8, where it's much more like just weird trinkets kind of on their body a lot of the time. But I don't think it's overly bad. I do think she looks quite good. But it's one of those things where it's apparently becoming a new regular thing where people complain in fighting games about how they represent these old characters. Yeah, whatever. Uh, Overall, I think the director's kind of on point with blasting the fans for just being stupid. Some of them are, of course, celebrating it, or some of them do have reasonable complaints that don't really. They're not insulting; they just work out. But we had Assassin's Creed Shadows that was leaked, which is not surprising considering that more than likely the work that has been done on the game has been very non-existent. I'm sure this is more of the delay being pushed into the actual financial timeline. It has probably nothing to do with quality, and it really sucks to see Ubisoft. As I talked about earlier with BioWare, I do happen to think Ubisoft at one point was a very good company to always put your bets in. If you paid $60 for Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, you got plenty of hours, and more importantly, they were pretty fun. Yes, they weren't always the greatest. I'm not going to sit here and say they were 10 out of 10s or even 8 out of 10s, but a 6 or 7 out of 10 game that is 40 hours is a good experience. I understand a lot of people don't like to hear that, but above average is still above average, and it still is a fun time if they do it well. But it's sad to see that apparently Ubisoft is pretty desperate to try and stay in the business or get sold to. There's been talks, I know, and offers and blah blah blah. It's sad to see Ubisoft go potentially down this route because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. Which goes into another thing about a video game company. Warner Brothers Games shuts down 3 studios, which I kind of expected. I think Warner Brothers is also like Sony at this point in that they just were too slow to understand that these big games have to make a ridiculous amount of money to outset the costs of the 6 year, 8 year plan that a lot of games ended up going to. Uh, when it comes to the studios they closed, though, I feel like one of them is really, really odd. Uh, but at the same time, like I can get it. We'll talk about the one that I think it makes a lot of sense, and that is, I think it's Player First Games. I think it's called, but it was only acquired by Warner Brothers last year, and it finished the development of Multiverses, and yeah, they ended up losing like I think it was 100 million for something. I don't remember exactly Multiverses. A lot of this has to do with the way Warner Brothers handled Multiverses, not the game company. So it kind of sucks to see that that the execs is ruining the overall things with it. I understand development wasn't clean for Multiverses, but I feel like execs had a lot more of a problem. Warner Brothers Games San Diego was also closed. I think this was mostly just for uh like game assistants. Uh like so basically you have a development studio that they kind of just like put somewhere and they're like, okay, a lot of you are gonna go and work and you're gonna help on this project. Okay, next week we're gonna do this, and it's a lot more like that. Uh and then there's also other stuff. Uh Warner Brothers Games Montreal laid off nearly 100 workers in December, and while they still own 9 video game studios, I do think we're probably going to see some more closing of studios because the fourth quarter earnings will happen, I think, in a couple days, or I think tomorrow, maybe. Uh, and we'll see how it is. I don't think they've done well. Their last big games haven't really been amazing. And especially with what was apparently a well worked on project being closed in Wonder Woman, this is going to be pretty hurtful. But I want to talk about Monolith Productions. If you don't know, Monolith Productions is actually a very, very well regarded uh, studio. If you don't know, they did Shadow of Mordor, which already a lot of you are like, whoa, Shadow of Mordor is a very, very good game. What the hell? And that's also not to mention Fear. If you're a Fear fan, this is very hurtful. I think Fear is one of those games that never got to like shine as much as a lot of the later games that came out because it just missed the boat. And the remasters of the games, one, are non-existent really, and two, uh, they need to be on newer consoles. They need to exist, and so a lot of people just haven't played Fear, which is really sad because I think it's a very good series. I would love to see a remaster, remake, collection, whatever you want to call it, of Fear, and see how people react to it. Would be really, really cool. And this is also the same studio that was working on the new Wonder Woman game, which apparently had been in production for 4 years or 3 years, something like that. Overall, it is kind of sad to see this go, and it's another example of really poor decision making on the executive side of video game development. Because, yes, I get it. Multiverses ultimately cost you a lot of money, actually. It wasn't as successful as you wanted, and there's a lot of controversy around it. I can get shuddering the studio behind it because ultimately of how much it cost. I don't know what Warner Brothers Games San Diego ended up doing. Did I say San Diego? What San Diego? I feel like I said that wrong. Uh, was more of an outsourced studio, so it makes sense to close for employee costs. I can get that. Monolith Productions is a little weird. I feel like there's a lot of legacy in this just studio, and not to mention like Middle Earth and like Fear, but they were working on a game that apparently was well on its way. So it's a little disheartening to read and learn about that. But hopefully for Monolith Productions, a lot of the people there work out. They find their way and whatever have you. And then we're gonna end today on another topic about a another video game company. Woo. Because of the way Steam requires it now, uh, you have to disclose if use of AI generated content was used in developing the game that's on Steam. And Call of Duty, Activision for Black Ops 6, uh, had to disclose that they used generative AI tools to help develop in game assets, which I feel like needs to be changed. Not the AI needs to be changed for sure, but Steam needs to change what was used for AI legally. I think this is something that needs to be specifically stated for AI usage in video games, because if it's for like texture dumping, or like if it's for just like recycling rock formations, I can get it. I get it. You don't want to put someone there for 60 hours a week during crunch time. I say 60 hours, more like 80. And you don't want them to form freaking rocks in a landscape. I can totally get that from a business perspective. You don't want to do that. But I do think specifics need to be highlighted, actually. Because otherwise, I feel that it can be very misleading, because they didn't say what they used the AI tools on, and did they use it on character models? And if so, is likeness a problem now? If did it use it on specific, like maybe a dialogue person, like an actual voice actor replacement? If they like copied a voice, if so, that's misleading as hell. And also, if it sounds like anybody, then they could be in like if they said something weird, or like, oh, I'm gonna kill that baby without context, and then it gets attached to their name, then it becomes a problem. And I feel like you need to specifically say what AI use is for. Like, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, AI being used. I do, but it's much more of a personal problem, and also at the same time, I don't I don't think it has a lot of fitting opportunities that don't actually close other opportunities. So it's one of those things where I personally think that, but I could definitely see how it can help from a business perspective. Uh, and it's one of those things where I hope it never exceeds the very small percentage that is hopefully it's going to stay. I understand it's getting higher, but hopefully it stays pretty low. But yeah, I am interested to see the the overall, like, kind of the way this lays out. I understand Steam is actually, or Valve specifically, has been denying certain games from uh, like using AI generated content and not like blocking them because of it. And so like Epic Games has been bringing them over, and I happen to think this makes Epic Game Store look pretty middling. I don't know why I said middling to even bad. I do think it's important to highlight the just what is in a video game. Like, if people are totally against AI, you need to state what AI is used, and it's only fair to the consumer what they're participating in. It's like if I loaded up a game and there's an NFT in there, like or if I go into a game and it's like, oh, by the way, this is about KKK rallies and how good they are. It's like, no, I don't want to participate in that. That's rude, and more importantly, it's disgusting. And I hope that we get to the point where we can highlight what is actually being AI generated in these games and in anything. I really I get that AI is treated as the saying of just like it's disgusting to use. When it's used, a lot of people are like, "Well, you didn't actually do." Yeah, I get that. I really do. At this point, those people are gonna do it. Those people are gonna go and they're gonna try and sneak AI art as real art. We need to put heavy restrictions on at least saying when it's used, or we need to put fines. We need to put something where if you don't say what it is and people find out, then you need to be punished for it. I think that's the very important line we need to draw at some point, because people are going to use it anyway. But yeah, that's going into more Activision issues, which at this point Activision is a kind of carousel of problems going in a circle. So overall, I'm interested to see how this kind of gets responded to eventually, because Valve has been taking a pretty clean stance, which Valve isn't always the greatest company. None of them are. But I happen to kind of agree on how they're blocking a lot of kind of things. And people are going to work around them, of course, as always, but it's very interesting. Overall, that is the past week of news. I skipped a couple of the news stories that I don't think really fit for kind of like talking about stuff going on. There's like a new team by Bloober Team, uh, or new game based on apparently a Konami IP. Interesting to see. There's a few other things that I did potentially want to talk about, but we know very little information, so I'm just going to skip out on it. Overall, that's kind of been the news. No idea what I'm titling this. Maybe I'll just say like many stories. That sounds good. All right, there we go. Hopefully, I'll see you guys next week when we talk about what else has been going on in video game industry stuff. We have a couple of releases that are coming up. I know Monster Hunter Wilds, and a few other things, and we'll probably talk about how they are being received, similar to Avowed, how I did today. But I'll only highlight the big ones, or maybe an indie game that I think catches my attention. Overall, we'll see how it works then. Hopefully, you have a good day, and hopefully, you hear some news that is very, very good in the next week, and I'll get to talk about it. I'll catch you guys then.